A lone father restores a colossal alien cruiser, unaware its owner is a hidden royal heir. An HFY story in 3 parts. Part 1, The Wreck in the Canyon. Vance found the ship on a Tuesday, though out here on the Martian frontier, the days of the week meant nothing at all. He had been following a seismic reading for 3 days, pushing his old crawler through dust storms and over broken terrain. The quake had opened up something deep in Vols, and had learned long ago that quakes sometimes shook loose valuable things. Old mining equipment, abandoned colony supplies. Once, a whole cargo pod full of medical supplies that had earned him enough credits to keep his daughter fed for 6 months. But he had never found anything like this. The ship sat at the bottom of a newly formed canyon, half buried in red dust and ancient rock. It was enormous. Stopped his crawler at the edge of the cliff and just stared at it for a long time. The vessel stretched nearly 2 kilometers from one end to the other, its hull made of some material that seemed to drink in the pale Martian sunlight rather than reflect it. No human had ever built anything like it. Nothing in any database he had ever accessed looked even close to this. He should have called it in. He should have reported the find to the colonial authority and waited for the scientists and the military and whoever else wanted a piece of alien technology. That was the law. That was what a smart man would do. Climbed down into the canyon instead. He had been a salvage worker for 11 years now, ever since Sarah died and left him alone with a 3-year-old daughter to raise. In that time, he had learned to read machines the way other people read books. He knew when something was broken beyond repair and when it just needed patience and care. When he touched the cold surface of the alien hull for the first time, he felt something hum beneath his gloved fingers. A faint vibration, like a heartbeat that had almost stopped. The ship was not dead. It was waiting. Finding a way inside took him 2 weeks. The hull had no obvious doors or hatches but was stubborn. He mapped every centimeter of the surface he could reach, looking for seams, for weak points, for anything that might respond to his touch. On the 14th day, he found a section of hull that felt different from the rest, warmer, softer somehow. When he pressed his palm against it and held it there, the material simply parted and let him through. The interior of the ship took his breath away. The corridors were wide enough to drive his crawler through, and they curved in ways that made no geometric sense. Faint blue lights lined the walls, flickering weakly as he passed, as if the ship was using the last of its strength to guide him somewhere. Followed the lights for what felt like hours, deeper and deeper into the vessel, until he reached what could only be the engineering section. He knew it was the engineering section because it looked like a heart. Not a human heart, but something organic all the same. Massive chambers pulsed with dim bioluminescence, connected by conduits that looked more like veins than cables. In the center of it all sat a core of some kind, dark and cold and cracked down the middle. Spent 3 days just studying it. He took samples. He ran every scan his equipment could manage. He cross-referenced everything with his salvage databases and found absolutely nothing. This technology was beyond anything humanity had ever encountered. It was beyond anything anyone had ever imagined. And somehow, despite all of that, understood it. Not the science of it, not the physics or the biology or whatever principles made a ship like this possible, but he understood the damage. He understood that the core was not broken in a mechanical sense. It was hurt in a way that felt almost emotional. The ship had shut itself down on purpose, sealing away its own power because something had caused it tremendous pain. It was grieving, realized. The ship was grieving, and it had been grieving alone in the dark for a very long time. He moved his mobile habitat down into the canyon that same week. His daughter, 14 years old now and as stubborn as her father, complained about the isolation at first. But she adapted quickly, the way children do. She attended school through satellite uplink and did her homework in the cargo hold of the crawler while worked on the ship. Sometimes she helped him, handing him tools or holding lights steady. Mostly she watched and asked questions. "Why are you talking to it?" she asked one evening, after catching him speaking aloud to the ship's walls. Thought about how to explain. "Because I think it's listening," he said finally. "Because I think it needs someone to listen back." He told the ship about Sarah, about the cancer that had taken her when was barely old enough to remember her mother's face. He told it about the years of struggle that followed, the desperate scramble to provide for a child alone on a frontier world where everything wanted to kill you. He told it about fear and hope and love and loss, speaking aloud in the dim corridors as he worked to repair damage he barely understood. And slowly, impossibly, the ship began to respond. The first sign was the lights. They grew brighter week by week, their blue glow strengthening as if the ship was feeding on its words. Then the environmental systems came online, not all at once, but in small bursts of activity that seemed almost playful. A corridor would suddenly fill with fresh air. A door would open that had been sealed shut for centuries. Once, woke to find his tools organized neatly on a shelf he had not built, arranged by size and function in a way that made his work easier. The ship was learning. It was learning him, learning how he worked and what he needed, and in return was learning the ship. 8 months into the project, he made a discovery that changed everything. There was a chamber deep in the ship's core that he had not been able to access. Every time he tried, the ship gently redirected him elsewhere, closing doors and dimming lights to discourage his approach. Respected the boundary at first. He had his own secrets, after all. Everyone did. But one night, as he worked late on a particularly stubborn conduit, the ship opened the chamber on its own. The doors simply parted, revealing a passage that had not existed before. Blue lights lined the way, brighter than any he had seen, pulsing in a rhythm that felt almost urgent. Followed them. The chamber at the end of the passage was small compared to the rest of the ship, perhaps the size of his mobile habitat. In the center, suspended in a field of soft, golden light, floated a child. She looked to be about age, though her features were clearly not human. Her hair was silver white, drifting around her head as if she were underwater. Her skin had a faint blue tint, and when looked closely, he could see patterns beneath the surface, like veins filled with starlight. She wore a simple white garment that seemed to be part of the suspension field itself. She was beautiful. She was alien. And she had been sleeping in this ship, in this canyon, on this dead world, for a very, very long time. Stood there for hours, just watching her breathe. The ship hummed around him, its systems active and alert in a way they had never been before. It had shown him this secret on purpose, he realized. It had waited until it trusted him enough to reveal what it had been protecting all along. He did not know who she was. He did not know why she was here or what had happened to her people. But he knew, with a certainty that went beyond logic, that the ship had been waiting for someone like him. Someone who understood loss. Someone who knew how to be gentle with broken things. Went back to work with new purpose. The ship was not just a machine to be repaired. It was a guardian, wounded and desperate, protecting a child it could not wake on its own. Whatever had hurt it, whatever had driven it to hide here at the edge of nowhere, was going to fix it. He was going to bring this ship back to life, and together, they were going to wake the girl in the golden light. He did not know that she was a princess. He did not know that empires had risen and fallen while she slept, or that factions across the stars still hunted for her after 3,000 years. He did not know that by healing the ship's grief with his own, he had triggered a signal that was even now racing across the void toward ears that had been listening since before humanity discovered fire. All knew was that a child needed help, and he was going to give it. That was what fathers did. Part 2, The Awakening. The girl woke on a morning like any other, 2 years after first found the ship. He had not been trying to wake her. He had learned early on that the stasis field was beyond his ability to control. It responded only to the ship itself, and the ship had made it clear that the girl was not ready, so focused on everything else instead. He repaired conduits and restored systems. He rebuilt sections of hull that had been damaged by whatever catastrophe had brought the vessel here. He learned to speak to the ship through touch and tone, developing a language of gestures and sounds that let him communicate his intentions. By the end of the second year, he had restored nearly 60% of the ship's functions. The lights were bright and steady now. The environmental systems kept the interior at a comfortable temperature. Many of the doors opened at his approach, and some of the ship's internal systems had begun to anticipate his needs before he even knew what they were. Had started calling the ship, after the biblical figure who had been raised from the dead. Thought the name fit. He was in the engineering section when the stasis field finally released. The golden light flickered once, twice, and then simply faded away. The girl drifted slowly downward until her bare feet touched the floor, and then she opened her eyes. They were remarkable eyes. The irises shifted color constantly, cycling through shades of blue and green and gold like oil on water. The pupils were vertical, like a cat's. When they focused on, he felt a pressure in his skull that was not quite pain. And then suddenly, the ship's translation systems came online, and the pressure resolved into something like understanding. "You are not," the girl said. Her voice was hoarse from centuries of disuse, but the words came through clearly. "But the ship has chosen you. Why?" Did not have a good answer for that. "I found it," he said simply. "I fixed what I could. I talked to it when it seemed lonely." The girl stared at him for a long moment. Then something happened to her face that eventually learned was a smile. "You talked to it," she repeated. "My people built this ship 3,000 years ago, and not one of them ever thought to simply talk to it." Her name was, which she asked him to shorten to because the full version was, in her words, tedious. She was 12 years old by her people's counting, though that meant something different for a species that aged more slowly than humans. Her mother had been the empress of something called the Ascendancy. Her father had been a fleet admiral who died defending their home from usurpers. The Civil War had consumed everything. Loyalist factions had hidden here, in a ship that had been her nursery vessel since birth, on a world so remote and unremarkable that no one would think to look. They had programmed the ship to sleep until someone came to wake it, someone worthy, someone the ship itself judged capable of protecting the last heir to a fallen empire. No one had come. The war had burned itself out. The Ascendancy had fractured into 1,000 squabbling successor states and had slept through all of it, waiting for a rescue that never arrived. Until Vance stumbled into her tomb and woke her up by being kind to her ship. "I don't understand," said, after had explained as much as he could about humans and Earth and the Martian frontier. "Why would you help a ship that was not yours? Why would you spend years repairing something that gave you nothing in return?" Shrugged, it seemed like the right thing to do. "Considered this. You are a very strange creature," she said finally. "I think I like you." Took to immediately. The two girls were close enough in age to become friends, and appointed herself as guide to human culture with an enthusiasm that left slightly worried. Within a week, the alien princess had learned about cartoons and peanut butter sandwiches and the importance of arguing with your father about bedtime. She taught how to read the ship's displays, which turned out to be emotion-based rather than linguistic. You had to feel what you wanted the ship to do, not think it. The hummed with something like contentment. For the first time in 3,000 years, it had a crew again. But empires do not stay forgotten. The signal that had emitted when it woke was subtle, encoded in frequencies that no human instrument could detect. But the signal had traveled far, carried by methods that had nothing to do with light or radio waves. And 3,000 years was nothing to species that measured their histories in geological epochs. The successor states had devolved and warred and reconciled and devolved again over the. But some factions had never stopped listening for that signal. The loyalists had waited, patient and faithful, for any sign that the lost princess still lived. The descendants of the usurpers had waited too, determined to finish what their ancestors had started. The first ships arrived in Martian orbit 6 months after woke. Was in the command center when they alerted him, flooding his mind with images and sensations that took him several seconds to process. Ships were coming, many ships, some were enemies, some were something else. The ship could not tell him more than that, but it was afraid. He found in the observation deck, staring at a display that showed the incoming vessels. Her face was pale beneath its blue tint. "The first group bears the insignia of the hegemony," she said quietly. "They are the descendants of the people who killed my family. The second group, I think they might be loyalists, but I cannot be sure." "What do they want?" asked, though he already knew the answer. "The hegemony wants me dead," said. "The loyalists want me alive, but only so they can use me to claim legitimacy for their own ambitions. Neither of them cares what I want." She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was very small. "I am 12 years old. I do not want to be an empress. I just want to stay here with you and..." Put his hand on her shoulder. "Then that's what's going to happen," he said. The first demands came within hours. The hegemony wanted surrendered for war crimes tribunal, which meant execution. The loyalists wanted her placed in protective, meant a gilded cage. Earth's governments, suddenly aware that they were not alone in the universe, wanted access to the alien technology. Everyone wanted something, and no one was asking what herself wanted. Listened to the demands with growing anger. He had spent 2 years caring for this ship, talking to it, healing it with patience and kindness. He had watched an alien child wake from 3,000 years of sleep and learn to laugh again. He had become something he had not expected to be, a father again, to a girl who was not human but who needed him just the same. He was not going to let anyone take that away. "Show me," he said to the ship. "Show me everything you can do." The responded with an eagerness that surprised him. Information flooded his mind, weapon systems and defensive capabilities and engine specifications that made his head spin. The ship was still only 70% restored, but that 70% represented more power than anything humanity had ever built. It was a royal vessel, designed to protect the most precious cargo the Ascendancy had ever known. And for the past 2 years, it had been learning from Vance. Ship did not fight like a vessel. It fought like a human one, improvised, desperate, and absolutely refusing to quit. Had jury-rigged half its systems with salvage techniques that its original builders would have considered insane. He had rerouted power through conduits that were never meant to carry it, creating redundancies that made the ship harder to disable. He had talked to it about human history, about the wars humanity had fought, and the tricks they had used to survive against superior forces. The had listened, the had learned. When the hegemony fleet moved to intercept, and the loyalist commander demanded immediate surrender for her own protection, Vance sat down in the command throne of an alien warship and asked it, politely, sincerely, as one friend to another, if it would help him protect his family. The said yes. Part 3, The Human Equation. The battle above Mars lasted 9 minutes. In that time, every calculation made by both alien fleets was rendered completely wrong by a single factor they had failed to consider. A human father who had no intention of playing by their rules. Did not know how to command a warship. He did not understand fleet tactics or energy weapon frequencies or the political implications of firing on sovereign vessels. What he understood was simple. People were trying to hurt his kids, and that was the best tool he had ever held in his hands. The hegemony commander moved first, sending a wave of fighters toward the canyon where they had been hidden for. They expected an easy target, a damaged relic, barely functional, crewed by primitives who had no idea what they were dealing with. They were wrong. Had spent years learning every system on this ship. He knew its quirks and its weaknesses and its hidden strengths. More importantly, he knew how to think like a salvage worker, which meant he knew how to make broken things work in ways their designers never intended. When the first fighters closed in, overloaded the non-essential systems to create a massive sensor bloom that blinded their targeting computers. While they struggled to reacquire lock, he vented atmosphere from the lower decks in controlled bursts, using the escaping gas as emergency thrust to dodge their weapons' fire. The ship groaned and shuddered around him, but it held together. The rose from the canyon like something out of a nightmare, 2 kilometers of alien warship moving with a speed and agility that should have been impossible for something its size. Did not try to fight fair. He rammed through the fighter formation, using the ship's massive hull as a weapon, scattering the smaller craft like leaves in a storm. What is he doing? The hegemony commander demanded, watching his tactical display with growing disbelief. That ship should not be able to move like that. His officers had no answer. The vessel they were facing bore the markings of a royal cruiser from 3,000 years ago, but it was not fighting like any royal cruiser in their historical records. It was fighting dirty. It was fighting desperate. It was fighting like something that had absolutely nothing to lose. The loyalist commander watched from a safe distance, waiting to see how the battle would unfold. Her orders were clear: recover the princess alive, eliminate anyone who stood in the way. But the human in the command throne was complicating her calculations. He should have been irrelevant, a primitive creature in over his head, easily brushed aside once the hegemony softened up the target. Instead, he was winning. Felt the responding to his thoughts, anticipating his needs before he could articulate them. The ship had learned his patterns over 2 years of careful work, and now it was applying that knowledge in ways that surprised even him. When he needed more power to the shields, it rerouted energy from systems he did not even know existed. When he wanted to fire, it chose targets with an efficiency that no human gunner could match. But did not want to destroy these ships. He wanted to stop them. He called out over the ship's internal communication system. "I need you to get to the secondary command center and stay there until I tell you otherwise." "Already done, Dad's voice came back, steady despite the chaos. "We're watching, you're doing great." Despite everything, smiled. The hegemony flagship was the biggest threat, a massive dreadnought that had been built specifically to hunt down and destroy vessels like the. Its commander was experienced and ruthless, and he was not going to let some human embarrass him in front of his fleet. He ordered a full assault, bringing all his remaining ships to bear on the enemy vessel. Saw the attack coming through the sensors. A wall of fire was heading toward him, enough energy to crack a planet's crust. Any sane commander would have retreated or surrendered. Flew straight into it. The shields flared white under the assault, absorbing punishment that would have vaporized any human vessel. But had noticed something during his 2 years of repair work. The shields were not the ship's only defense. The hull itself was alive in some way, capable of hardening and reforming under stress. He had seen it heal small injuries. He was betting it could handle larger ones too. He was right. The burst through the barrage like a monster emerging from flames, trailing fire and debris, but very much intact. Before the hegemony commander could react, was on top of him. The slammed into the dreadnought's forward section, not hard enough to destroy it, but hard enough to crack its command module and disable its main weapons. The hegemony flagship went dark, its remaining vessels scattered in confusion. The loyalist commander stared at her tactical display for a long moment. Then she ordered her fleet to stand down. "Get me a communication channel to that ship," she said quietly. "I want to speak with whoever is in command." Accepted the call. He was exhausted, covered in sweat, his hands shaking from the adrenaline that was finally starting to fade. But his voice was steady when he spoke. "My name is Vance," he said. "I'm the one taking care of this ship and the girl it was protecting. If you're here to help, you're welcome. If you're here to take her away or hurt her, I suggest you leave while you still can." The loyalist commander was silent for a long moment. "You are a human," she said finally. "A primitive species that has barely left your own planet, and you just defeated a hegemony assault fleet in 9 minutes." "I had help," said. "The ship likes me." "So I see." The commander's voice was thoughtful now, calculating. "The princess, is she unharmed?" "She's fine, and she's not going anywhere she doesn't want to go." "You understand that she is the legitimate heir to the ascendancy, that there are factions across 100 systems who have been waiting 3,000 years for her return." "I understand she's a 12-year-old girl who lost her family and woke up alone in a galaxy that wants to use her for their own purposes." Leaned forward, his eyes hard. "She didn't ask for any of this. She doesn't want to be an empress. She wants to be a kid with people who care about her, and that's what she's going to get." "You cannot protect her forever," the commander said. "The hegemony will send more ships. Other factions will come. The galaxy will not simply forget that she exists." "Then the galaxy is going to learn something new," said. "Humans don't give up. We don't stop fighting for the people we love. You can throw your whole navy at this ship, and I'll find a way to beat it. You can try to take my daughter, either of my daughters, and I will tear your entire civilization apart with my bare hands if I have to." The communication channel was silent for a long time. "You called her your daughter," the commander said finally. "Yes. The ship chose you. It showed her to you when it did not have to, and now you claim her as family." "Yes." Another long pause. The old ways say that the ship's judgment is absolute. If it chose you to wake the princess, then you are her guardian by right. The commander seemed to be wrestling with something. My fleet will withdraw. We will. Speak again when things are calmer. The channel closed. One by one, the loyalist ships turned and jumped away into whatever dimension they used for faster-than-light travel. The disabled hegemony vessels were collected by their surviving escorts and retreated as well. Sat in the command throne for a long time, staring at the stars. Then he felt two pairs of arms wrap around him from behind, one human, one not quite. "Dad," said, her voice thick with emotion. "That was the coolest thing I've ever seen." "You called me your daughter," said softly. "Did you mean it?" Turned and pulled both girls into a proper hug. "Of course I meant it," he said. "You're family now, both of you, and nobody is going to change that." The weeks that followed, the galaxy slowly came to terms with what had happened above Mars. The hegemony had been humiliated by a single ship crewed by a human salvage worker and 2 children. The loyalist factions had discovered that the princess they had been waiting for did not want their throne, and Earth's governments had learned that humanity was not alone in the universe, and that their best defense against alien threats was, apparently, a stubborn man who refused to let anyone hurt his kids. Formally adopted under human law, which created a legal tangle that kept diplomats and lawyers busy for months. By the time they sorted it out, the precedent had been set. Last heir to the ascendancy was now also Vance, daughter of and sister of Citizen of Earth. The loyalists were not happy. The hegemony was furious. Various other factions sent representatives to demand, negotiate, or threaten, listened to all of them politely, and then told them to leave. "She doesn't want to be your empress," he said, over and over again. "She wants to be a kid. Come back in a few decades and maybe she'll have changed her mind. Until then, this conversation is over." The still only 70% restored was more than enough to back up his words. Reporters came from every corner of Earth, wanting to interview the man who had become the most significant human in history. Gave them exactly one statement: "I'm a salvage worker. I found a ship that needed fixing and a kid who needed a home. I did what anyone would do." They pressed him for more. He refused. There was work to do, after all. There was still only 70% restored. 30% remained, full of mysteries waiting to be uncovered. And somewhere in the ship's vast databases, there were star charts to worlds that no human had ever seen. Vance had never wanted to be important. He had wanted to be a good father, to give a future, to find something worth saving in the endless scrap of the frontier. Instead, he had found a princess, woken a legend, and accidentally become the bridge between humanity and an interstellar civilization. But that was okay. Important or not, he was still the same man he had always been. A father, a worker, a stubborn fool who refused to give up on broken things. The universe, it turned out, was full of things worth salvaging. Ships that needed repair, children who needed homes, civilizations that had forgotten how to be kind. Vance intended to find every single one. At the end,